Good evening. Sorry, I'm starting again because of net problem. It got disconnected. Today's issues to discuss are number one, role of Botox in preoperative preparation for incisional hernias. Its current trends, indications and contraindication and technique. This can be a full long question in DNB. Second point is the anatomical basis of TAR repair, the technique and its complication. The third topic of discussion today is complications of posterior component separation, identification and management. So under these three headings, this lecture is primarily aimed at young surgeons, and my senior friends who are observing should put in their effort and share their knowledge so that all of us are benefited. I am a learner in component separation myself, with a single digit number as yet, but as a curious senior student in surgery, I continue to learn, and the best way to learn is to teach. So I follow that route. So let me start first with Botox. The Botox has following indication in incisional hernia. Number one, on abdominal wall reconstructions which are planned. Number two, in post-operative patients where there is lot of pain and in lateral wall spasm can be dealt by Botox injection. Then open abdomen secondary to laparoscopy is another indication. Massive abdominothoracic herniation is the last indication. Hence, with these indications, the commonest is the planned AVR reconstruction. And now the contraindications are severe COPD, pre-existing myopathies, myasthenia gravis, and patient on aminoglycoside. For using Botox, the only preoperative evaluation is bleeding profile so that the patient doesn't have any abnormalities. The standard dose of Botox is 300 units diluted in 200 ml of normal saline. So every 100 ml contains now 150 ml of 100 ml of NS will contain 150 units of Botox. So the method is the two syringes which are used simultaneously, which are connected. I can draw a picture. Two syringes, one with Botox, another with saline. They are connected to the needle. The needle is inserted in the abdomen at three places. A mid-axillary line here, posterior axillary line here, and anterior axillary line here. So at each place we inject 25 ml in each muscle. At each site it is 25 ml. Hence in each muscle it is 8.5 ml in each muscle. This is a technique which is meant to be used by the practicing surgeons as well as by postgraduates answering the examiner. And if a postgraduate answers like this, I think the examiner will be flabbergasted by the answer. 3 sites on each site, 25 ml at each site, 8.5 ml in each muscle. Now under ultrasound control, the Botox is injected, and if by any chance there is a suspicion of injection of Botox, you can always inject a saline. The second syringe has a saline in it. So inject saline through that so that the layer in which we are injecting is identified. Now once we identify by small amount of saline, then we inject Botox 8.5 ml at one site in each muscle. The technique is you start with transversus first. Why not external oblique first? Because if we inject external oblique first, the fluid will produce interface which will interfere with identification of the muscles below. So we come inside out, and thereby that completes the injection. Now the Botox is effective maximally after 2 to 3 weeks of injection, and it lasts for up to 6 months. So the ideal situation is you inject Botox in a large incisional hernia, and after 2 to 3 weeks produce progressive pneumoperitoneum, and then get the benefit of both of these techniques. Pneumoperitoneum we discussed last time. So that is all what somebody needs to know about Botox role in. I have told you indications, contraindications, technique. Okay, now the next question is TAR repair. Now let me say that all of you who are interested, the practicing surgeons who want to get themselves involved in TAR technique, the best thing is to own or to read the textbook of the Atlas of Abdominal Wall Reconstruction by Professor Rosen. It is so illustrative. On every small thing which you read, you will feel that you have gained something and you did something which was not right in our last, at least I realized that there is a lot to gain from that book. Now let us understand transversus abdominis was an unknown muscle few years ago. Somehow, after the technique, everywhere in every meeting, every place, the hernia society has come up, and the basis of hernial surgery is today TAR repair. Anybody who doesn't do TAR repair is not the hernia surgeon. But there is one paradox. Though all the credit is being named as TAR repair, transverse release, there is an equal component which I am going to elaborate with photography, that the posterior lamella of internal oblique is simultaneously released. So there is an equal partner called the posterior lamella of or leaflet of internal oblique, the release of which has to be done along with transversus abdominis, which contributes equal or more than transversus abdominis in the release of phenomena. So what should be the preoperative preparation? Preoperatively, CT is mandatory for all these, and the optimization includes nutritional evaluation, weight loss. If the patient has got BMI of 45, he needs a weight loss surgery, and if possible, the patient should be brought by medical management to BMI of 35. The chronic pulmonary and cardiopulmonary conditions need to be assessed. Diabetes needs to be controlled. Most people agree that HbA1c should be 7 at least 60 days before the repair. This is a fact which honestly I didn't know before this lecture. I thought the 7 should be a fair figure to 2, 3, 4 days before pre-op check. But Professor Rosen thinks that it should be more than a month before surgery. It should be HbA1c 7. And there is no tolerance of smoking with the complex hernia repair. A smoker should not be taken up for surgery until he gets obstructed. Right. So, selection of the mesh. Selection of the mesh is, number one point is, never use an anti-adhesive mesh, because the adhesions don't form and there is a lot of seroma formation and more bowel complications. If there is contamination in the wound, use a biological mesh. If it is a clean case, use a protein mesh, 30 by 30, medium weight. And if there is a large defect in a heavy patient, I am repeating, large defect, heavy patients, and in which you need to do bridging. If the pulmonary pressures are going up after closure or approximation, then we need to use a heavy weight mesh so that there is no mesh fracture. Regarding the next step is incision. The incision is a generous midline to include the previous scars, ulcerations and defects. The umbilicus is nearly always lost in this procedure. So it is better to inform the patient that we may have to remove the umbilicus. The lower abdominal crease should be avoided because that is likely to get infected, and paniculectomy should be avoided. Then what is the time? The time for paniculectomy is when the hernia repair has been done, mesh has taken well, wound has healed. So after 3 months, if for cosmetic reasons you want to do paniculectomy, is justified, but not along with. Now once the abdomen is opened, now let me come down to technique. Through the long incision, a blue towel is put in and all the gut is pushed below the towel. This towel is so that no bowel is visible and the inadvertent enterotomy doesn't occur. The complete adhesion lysis needs to be done because we do not want any adhesions which may become symptomatic later on to be left behind. No bowel issue should be left to be addressed on a later date, because after such a mesh placement, next surgery is not going to be easy. Second point, when you are doing adhesion lysis, this is a learning for myself also. When you are doing adhesion lysis, do not mobilize the right colon, because if you mobilize the right colon, when you go in the lateral paracolic gutter doing for the mesh placement, then the peritoneum there will be buttonholed and then the mesh will get in touch with the bowel directly. I hope I have made this point clear. All the previous meshes in the belly in any other layer should be removed, and before removing the mesh, remove the sutures and the tags which are anchoring the mesh. While we are dissecting in the pelvis, the dissection is first done medial to deep inferior epigastric artery vessels towards the pubic symphysis. Then round ligament in all girls is divided and the cord structures are depatronized. After the medial dissection is done, when you switch down to laterally, the dissection must go till the medial border of psoas. So that is the pelvic part of the dissection. When we do the superior dissection, the plane is superficial to the falciparum ligament and deep to the linea. I am repeating, The plane is superficial to falciparum ligament and deep to linea. In the upper third, we have just a minute. Just give me In the upper third, we have fleshy fibers, muscle belly of transversus abdominis. In lower third, we have only fascia transversalis and peritoneum. And the middle third is the most difficult. So the landmarks above superiorly is the medial to costal margin and inferiorly 1 centimeter lateral to inferior epigastric artery. The lateral dissection is done primarily with a blunt instrument like a sponge stick or the Kittner dissector. Once you are in the correct plane laterally, there is no bleeding. If there is bleeding, eventually what we want is a large retrorectus preperitoneal as an autologous barrier for a Prolene mesh. Now let me take you across the atlas. This is the atlas by Professor Rosen, from which I am showing you the pictures. This is a typical Reeves stopa. This is a typical Reeves stopa. This is the deep inferior epigastric vessels. This is the muscle mobilized. This is mobilized laterally till we reach the neurovascular bundle going upwards. These are thick vessels. Let me show you in the next film. Right angle moving next to the muzzle, and this is the posterior rectus sheath. This is the upper end. This is the lower end. Lower end, that is the arcuate line, and below that it is fascia transversalis and peritoneum. Now the next film I am going to show you. This is how the lower dissection is done, laterally first, and then in the midline. This is the area where with diathermy you divide from the midline anteriorly. See the blue towel in the background, and the whole peritoneum is dissected off. Now this is a key figure. See carefully. These are the neurovascular bundles, the blue towel. Now this is transversus covered with posterior lamella. Remember, all the credit is going to transversus abdominis. Nobody is naming posterior lamella of internal oblique. And in the release, it is 5 millimeter medial to the neurovascular bundle. So the careful point is to avoid neurovascular bundle. Now you see this. This is in the upper abdomen. The fascia or the posterior leaflet of internal oblique is being divided, and with a right angle clamp passed through the transversus. So that is where the transversus abdominis is divided. गिलास में ढका, गिलास उसको पीछे पड़ा हुआ. Now, having divided the transversus, what we see in the end, there is only peritoneum. And this is the posterior rectus sheath. Now this can be with a sponge stick pushed laterally, and it is sensible to push the peritoneum away from the muscle, then muscle away from the peritoneum. See the final picture? And the peritoneum is closed and the mesh is placed. Now the anchorage. A lot of people currently do not believe that there is a need of anchorage in their cases because they have done enough of adhesion lysis and the space created is quite a big. But there are others who like to fix, and the fixing is usually what Professor Rosen recommends is around 8 sutures, 3 on the sides, on the top and on below. And maybe I can share with you a picture how the transfacial sutures This is the picture of transfacial sutures being fixed and in the skin. So then the anterior rectus sheath is closed in front of it, and there is a divided thought process on the drainage of the retromuscular space. There are people who do not drain the space. They think enough hemostasis has been done. But Dr. Rosen recommends that we need to put 2 drains, something like Blake's drain or JP drain, and keep them till the drainage is 30 to 40 cc per day, only then remove it. There are others who don't drain. But then drain or no drain is a subject of debate since years. And that's all. Now, the chapter on complications. This was my greatest learning in the conference in Sir Gangaram Hospital, and this lecture on complications were dealt with by Professor Ramana Balasubramaniam, and he really educated all of us. So what I am going to talk is the gist of his lecture as I perceived. I am subject to correction. So this can also be a postgraduate questions. Remember, dear postgraduates, most examiners forget that they learned this something at 61st birthday of their life, but they expect all of you to know at your 26th birthday. So that some of the questions asked in exam, especially in DNB, are those under the recent advances which the examiner has recently learned. So complications of AVR are the recent knowledge of all examiners. So let me enunciate one by one. So one common complication is hematoma, where if there is a small hematoma, it will get settled itself. The drains, there were clues that the drains which were put up, if the hematoma is large, if there are clots in the front of the mesh and the rectus abdominis, then such clots will never be evacuated by small drains. If there's a major bleed, it needs to be evacuated laparoscopically. And if there's a minor bleed, it might settle itself. But the point is, how do you pick up hematoma? That is where the role comes. Any patient, one very important lesson which I learned was, professor said, even after 6 hours long surgery, if a patient is not fit to go home after 24 hours, there is something wrong. That something wrong can be one of these three things. And if that wrong thing has occurred, then the only method, our threshold of post-operative CT scan should be very low. We should get an early CT scan and have a diagnosis that to get down to the early CT and pick up the situation. So first complication is hematoma, which can be picked up on CT scan. If it is small hematoma, it will get sorted itself. If it is a big hematoma, it will require laparoscopic drainage. Hello sir, welcome.
I am in the chamber, concentration chamber.
Welcome sir. Hello.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome to Screen Share.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Okay. So we have Professor Mohan Jairam with us. Welcome. So the second complication is posterior recurrence. Posterior recurrence is when I would like to draw a diagram for younger folks to understand. If this is the skin, this is the sheath, this is our PRS. PRS is a repeatedly used name in AVR as posterior rectus, and this is the mesh. So posterior recurrence is when there is a dehiscence of PRS somewhere and the loops of bowel get stuck here. This leads to very early gangrene. Patient may manifest with obstruction. So once we have suspicion of posterior recurrence, professor said, if you have a wedding the same day, postpone the wedding but re-explore the patient. Because if you do not identify posterior recurrence early, the patient will die. And remember, hernia is one disease with which the patient has lived for last decades, and nobody should die because they couldn't pick it up. All the signs will not appear very soon after the posterior recurrence. It is your high index of suspicion. And the same fact was highlighted by Dr. L.M. Arora from France, Bombay. He also highlighted, he talked about radiology in AVR. He talked about this fact of posterior dehiscence or recurrence. This is also known in some textbooks as interstitial hernia. Then the third complication is sepsis. Now sepsis in such situation, normally this kind of mesh is in a very vascularized compartment, and sepsis occurs less often. One very important precaution discussed in this conference was that complex abdominal hernia surgery is not for mobile surgeons who walk with a formalin chamber. What they wanted to say was that all the equipment must be nicely autoclaved. There is zero chance we can take on, sepsis in such cases. But compared to a onlay mesh, if the infection occurs in sublay mesh, which we are talking today, the chances are it will settle with dressings, VAC, antibiotics. because, and maybe a part of mesh may need to be excised because the skin on the top is vascular and there is usually no flap necrosis in this technique because there is no dissection between skin and superior rectus sheath. Sepsis is the third complication. The fourth most important complication is compartment syndrome or ACS. Now, the trick of ACS is not treatment. The trick of ACS is to prevent ACS. I'm repeating, how can we prevent ACS? First, calculate that every hernia patient who has a large hernia, a ventral hernia, a recurrent hernia, or a large size hernia, every patient should have a CT and calculate NACAs in text so that we find which patient has got loss of domain. Patients who have loss of domain should have a preoperative A, Botox, B, preoperative pneumoperitoneum, C, if there is not loss of domain but the hernia is big, or the loss of domain may not be there but a large hernia, bad COPD, bad lungs, you need to train the patients on preoperative lung exercises 3 weeks before. One very important thing which we learned in this conference was that some large hernias where there is no loss of domain, I mean they haven't got 25% and above, one of the methods is we put a tight abdominal binder with hernia reduced and ask the patient to do incentive spirometry and lung exercises so that we preoperatively mimic the situation which we are going to face post-operatively. So this is a very important lesson which all of us can practice and it costs nothing. Every surgical hospital has an abdominal binder. Just have a better quality binder, tight it nicely and put the patient on exercises. Now, if you think you have prepared the patient well, while you are trying to close the anterior rectus sheath, because posteriorly in TAR repair, you have lysed so nicely that there is no tension on peritoneal closure. After having done that, when you are going to close the posterior sheath, anterior sheath in front of the mesh, now the method is put Alice on both sides, say 4 Alice on right, 4 Alice on left. Try to cross them to mimic a cloyer and look at the peak flow pressures and see if the gradient rises. If the gradient rises more than 6, this is the patient who is going to develop ACS. So before you close, I am repeating, when PRS is closed, mesh is anchored or placed, and we are going to close anterior rectus sheath in front in the linea midline. We put 4 Alice on left, 4 on right, cross them to mimic the cloyer. And once you do that, if the quotient rises, if the peak pressures go up more than 6, now in this patient, do not close. Leave the gap between the two anterior rectus sheaths so that the heavyweight mesh will take care of it, and in the center it will act like a onlay. There may not be anything in front of it. If you think all got well and you have closed the belly and post-operative the pressure, after closure the pressures are going up, then you have to be again very proactive. And the answer is, do not reverse your patient. Keep the patient on ventilator, and this ventilation, mind it, may last for a week to 10 days on relaxant. Such a ventilation cannot be on sedation or midazolam. This has to be proper relaxation ventilation so that the body adjusts accordingly. All of us surgeons who are doing bigger incisional hernias or ventral hernias should be always thinking about ACS in a patient who has not got normal recovery. Increased intra-abdominal pressure, besides other things, can give rise to venous thrombosis in mesentery and produce massive gut gangrene from which a patient can conk off. So a patient post-op not doing well, drops his blood pressure. Think of mesenteric vascular thrombosis, venous type, and compartment syndrome. So these are the complications. They can be enumerated for postgraduate question. They can also be used by young surgeons. And I will invite all the senior faculty who is around or would watch this video later on should add on to it so that all of us learn more on LGS. Thank you very much. Dr. Mohan,
Thank you, sir.
would you
Thank you,
like
sir.
to say
It was a very
something?
nice
Yeah.
and crisp discussion. And I learnt a lot from you, sir. I learnt a lot from you, sir.
No, I'm only passing on what I keep learning from other friends.
Anyhow, thank you, sir.
I am only a clearing and forwarding agency.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Please
Thank you
put
for
up any
taking
questions.
your valuable time,
And
sir.